perspectives, different views, one voice.
Hey, hi everybody. Welcome to the LDN Perspective. Yes, so we're recording our 52nd episode. Thank you all, even the audience that have joined in today and everybody that is locked in for this episode. I'm your host. My name is Mo. I'm also joined by my brothers here, my friends. You can introduce yourselves.
I'm Kojo.
I'm Cam.
I'm Ali.
So welcome to this episode. We're going to be talking, well, the title we've named this episode, a little bit of a controversial one, is Police Officer was an African American. That's mainly in light in terms of the situations where you've had individuals call the police on Black people in any given situation, really, but highlighting those in America. And in this episode, we really want to just talk about in terms of everything that's going on at the moment, and in terms of what all our thoughts are in terms of all the protest riots, looting, and all the particular things that are happening around that. One of the things I really wanted to highlight in this episode, before we begin, was the importance of language. And I personally feel as we go through these experiences and what's happening, language is really a big key thing in how information is used, disseminated, and feelings are of what's going on. And one of the big things that I noticed really in terms of is one, in terms of the UK media, how they didn't really report the incident at all. Much in terms of like their top listings of reports until the Target shopping center was burnt down, and it was only then that it then became mainstream top news of what happened. And for me, in terms of language, I identify all the protest things happening. I wouldn't describe any of it as riots or looting and stuff. I literally use one word mainly to describe it all, and that's a rebellion. I feel this is a rebellion that we're experiencing against all the atrocities that has happened to our community in the hands of the police force, who I feel should be labeled as, in terms of language, they should be described as terrorists, because this is terrorist behavior in terms of what they are doing to the community. And in terms of the video that everybody's seen, one thing I do want to say, I reckon most people, when looking at it, everybody would have felt disturbed and angry. But when it comes to Black people, I would say a lot of them have an additional word, which I would use as terrified, mainly because when a normal average person sees or experiences the police, their first emotion isn't really to be afraid. But I would say in terms of mainly more people from the Black community, that is something that a lot of us feel, especially when we see the blue lights or the blue sirens coming around. It's more fear as opposed to concern in terms of helping or serving. In terms of language, really, the big three things is another thing that the BBC used was describing a situation is it was an altercation or a disagreement. And I would say the only word that should be described is it was a murder, not an altercation or anything, because I feel that's taken away from what happened and how serious this incident is. Those are really the main three things. Is one, I describe it as a murder, a killing. I describe the police officers that weren't acting as police officers, more as terrorists, terrorizing our community. And I describe all the responses that we're experiencing around is a rebellion. And those are really the kind of languages that I'm mainly using to describe most of this stuff. So I wanted to open it up to everybody else. Let me know what your thoughts are, what you see. I did want to direct it first to our hosts and get you guys' take on it.
I think I echo a lot of the kind of sentiments that you've kind of raised. I think the problem I kind of have, or what I kind of view this, is obviously we are in a good position regarding fighting for the rights of Black people. We shouldn't really be having this conversation, because these conversations have been had in the past and a lot of people have died to pave the way. for us to be in these positions in the first place. And I just hope, my main hope is that come next week, this has not all been forgotten, that this is not just something that's trending for now, that people are not just bored in their house, so they want to go and protest. And then obviously come next week, all this is kind of forgotten about. So I think for me, that's the key thing. The other thing that you mentioned when you mentioned language, how I kind of see this as well, is that a lot of the times when these things happen, in order to descale it or to dehumanize someone, there's a lot of kind of like smear campaign tactics. So for instance, what they might say about the person, only the past couple of days, I saw some kind of videos and images going around about George Floyd, what he was meant to be, what his occupation was, and all these kind of things, which is more of a tactic that is always used to kind of dehumanize someone, or for someone to look at that person to feel like, oh, he deserved it anyway. And it's a tactic that has been used for a long time. And the reason why I mentioned this is the role that we play in this tactic, because a lot of the times we have seen these things happen time and time again, but we also kind of add to it, meaning that if you have that video and you're sharing that video, then my main question is, why would you want to share that in the first place? Because clearly it's a tactic for them to use for people to say that, oh, maybe this guy actually deserved it. Now, one thing that obviously smear campaigns have to kind of bear in mind is that they try to say that you are different from them, that if it is you, you will not be treated like this because maybe you have a different occupation. A lot of the times when these things kind of happen, they try to dig out someone's past to say, oh, they had some petty crime or they've done A, B, C, and D. And I think the fundamental point here is that regardless of what crime someone has committed, they do not deserve to be treated that way. So I feel like we need to be quite careful some of the images and the messages that we're kind of sending out as well regarding this whole kind of movement for George Floyd.
Yeah, thanks for that, Coach. So just to remind everyone that's just joining, I know there's quite a few more people joining in the conversation. If you have any questions or comments or anything in particular that you've heard or want to raise yourself, please direct message Coach LDN, and he will at some point bring it up or introduce you to forward those comments. I'm just going to let Ali make some comments or words in regards to what your thoughts are.
For me, as well, Coach just tapped into, I'm really disgusted by this. I won't be surprised if next week or next month things are back to normal. I just won't be surprised. It won't faze me. The only problem is that I will expect more, but I wouldn't want to expect more, because from 450 years, I don't think it would take 1 week for all of this to go down and for the system to change. The system is more within the institution. It's nothing to do with individuals. Individuals, which is the Caucasians, they've got the privilege within the institution that is actually allowing this to happen. Like, for example, the workforce, for example, the educational system, for example, society, for example, when you're in the military and part of it. So that is the course part of what needs to be addressed. So once that is addressed, then the society, they will realize that actually we need to change and the privilege is not there anymore. But once those stuff are not addressed, regardless of what we are doing, yes, it's a start what we're doing, the fighting, the shouting, and saying that it's enough, it's all good. I'm not disputing that. I really like that. I really got the energy and say, yes, we are standing, but the system is there. Like, the system needs to change.
What I will say is, it's devastating what's happened to George Floyd. It's devastating that we're even in this position once again. But in our last conversation, for me, I emphasized the fact that it's about getting a conviction out of this, because we've seen this happen time and time again, and officers haven't been convicted. We can go out in the streets and we can protest as much as we want to. We could cause destruction to these particular areas, but what consequences are there for the police officers to commit these sort of acts? Because let's be perfectly honest, if this goes to trial and the officers are acquitted, we haven't really achieved anything. Because once again, we're gonna be no more forward than when we were before, because there's no real consequence for officers committing these sort of atrocious acts. I watched a Netflix TV show called Trial by Media, and one of the episodes was about a black man, Amadou Diallo, who was living in America. And this man was shot in his porch 41 times by police officers because they thought he was trying to get an address, which was his own. They shot him 41 times. These officers were taken to trial and all of them were acquitted. So my whole thing is that we really need to get to a point where these things are happening. When these officers go in court, believe you not, they get the best defense lawyers, and these defense lawyers will work tooth and nail to get these people on acquittal. You know, that consistently happens, and you see this play out all the time. And for me, most of the time, it's like prosecutors in the case, they'll put the facts forward, they'll argue their points, but there doesn't seem to be any real enthusiasm from my perspective to ever get that conviction, or even if there is, their cases aren't argued in the best way possible, and you've got defense lawyers that can break down the credibility of any one particular person who's been killed. In George Floyd's case, I don't think any of the stuff he does is even relevant. You know, this is a man, even if, you know, what they're saying is the case about him having a fraudulent check or whatever the case may be, this wasn't even a violent crime. It wasn't even a violent offense. So where in God's name can you justify using that level of force on someone who's lying on the floor? You've got your knee on their neck for, you know, we're talking like over 7 minutes. But, you know, the guy's saying, I can't breathe. And you know, and it's like, I saw a video about it happening in Philadelphia where another guy was taken to the ground by police, and I think they sort of subdued his breathing. And he was saying the exact same thing to them. And they were saying, don't run that here. That doesn't work here. None of that works here. And I've seen that video circulated on Instagram. So my whole thing is like, you think the officers really care if there's no real consequence? There has to be consequences here. And the only way you're going to get that is convictions, and not just convictions. They have to be getting significant prison sentences, because you can still get a conviction and not go to prison. You've seen that.
Yeah, go on, Coach. I think you want to say something.
No, because I was just wondering what Cam thought about this, because I definitely agree that setting some sort of precedent, some sort of example, that police officers will think twice before they act is important. But then I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the police officers have behaved this way for a long time. And I think the conviction is important, prison sentence is important, but I think thereafter what happens regarding the legislation is ultimately what's going to actually what will be the proof of the pudding for me. Because I feel like when we're looking at the case of George Floyd, and we look at initially the police officer was charged with third-degree murder, I believe, right? Guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what happened. And if it wasn't for the limelight that was thrown on this case, the protests, the riots in these cities, the other police officers, first of all, would not have been charged. That charge would not have then been, I think it's now second degree. They wouldn't have changed the charge now to second-degree murder. The point I'm trying to make here is that they could actually convict these guys. They could put them in prison for a long time. But if they're not changing their legislation, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is not going to happen again. And I think a lot of what you mentioned is that these guys actually have good defense lawyers. If that legislation in itself is not changing, don't you think this is something that will just keep happening? It could just be that this is like a watershed moment, or we hope for it to be a watershed moment where we actually get something tangible from it. Because with all this as well, we need to kind of get to a point to say, what exactly are we expecting from this?
Yeah, I mean, even just like to go back on that Amadou Diallo case, I remember that happened in the Bronx in New York. And at the time, the case was originally supposed to take place in the Bronx. And the defense lawyers argued and said that the officers wouldn't get a fair trial because the people within that community had a massive indifference toward the police. It was obviously they would make, you know, majority black community. And as a result of that, they managed to get the case transferred to another court where it was a majority, you know, white jury, and they were acquitted. And that's my whole point. It's like, how in God's name is any prosecutor even allowed to let that happen? You transfer a case from one part of the state to another simply because they're arguing the officers won't get a fair trial, you know, and then they got acquitted. And mind you not, the same thing could happen here. The amount of, you know, media coverage and sort of anger and everything that this case has sort of invoked, yeah, you know, it's great. It's great, you know, because it might force some change. But at the end of the day, it's still a legal system that we still need to overcome in terms of getting that conviction. And we don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, I understand now they've allowed the Attorney General to take over the case. And see, I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between which. I think initially it was state prosecutors and now it's the Attorney General that's dealing with it, that's prosecuting the case. And obviously that's an indication that obviously that, you know, they want to throw all that they can in terms of their resources to getting that conviction. But as you said, Kodge, this is only getting coverage because of what went on the ground. If this hadn't happened, this case would still be with state prosecutors. This officer would still be charged with third-degree murder. Nothing would have changed. So, you know, as you said, there has to be some form of change from the top going down. There has to be, you know, some form of legislative change, because, as I said, changing the culture in the police, that's a really difficult one, because I think that's going to take an extremely you know, it's going to take a lot of work in order to change that culture. It's going to obviously require officers to speak on other officers too. But I feel like legislation in some ways might change it. But also, to bring up another point, you know, this officer who's now been charged for murdering George Floyd, this man had 12 complaints over 20 years. You know, I was watching a video of one person talking about it and saying, you know, what happened with George Floyd was inevitable. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an anomaly. It was inevitable. This man had 12 complaints in the last 20 years and nothing was done. They allowed this man to continue policing.
All right, Coach, I know there must be some comments or people.
Yeah, the comments are heating up right now. So I have a comment. I think William kind of just added his point of view to this. He said, but even with a conviction, I understand the issue. It doesn't stop police brutality. The law needs to change US-wide and possibly globally. William, I'm not sure if this is something you want to be open to talk about, but if not, I'll move on to the other questions. So, did you guys got what? Yeah, sorry, I think William wants to add to that.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, I definitely get what he said in the situation with Diego, where we got shot 46 times, and they got they all got acquitted. I mean, it was in the 90s, you know, but I guess even now, I can't, like, even let's say, for example, they all get convicted, right? It doesn't, people might think, okay, justice is been done, but it doesn't stop the culture of police brutality. And I think it's quite, I think that the way that the US is set up, like in America, like law and order is so like seen so high in society, you know, even with the looting and everything that's going on, like the some of the protests that's gone violent, that's gone violent, right? Like people just kind of forget what it's even for. They don't even care about the guy dying. It's almost like, well, this shouldn't happen. This should be law and order. There shouldn't be looting and so forth. Like Americans care so much about law and order. I think they kind of just, I don't know, I kind of feel like that encourages police brutality, especially in the US, because that's they're so passionate about law and order, you know. And I think what I like to see, it could, this is the things that I'd like to see, but it will take a long time. But I think in America particularly, and maybe UK as well, that I think we need law and order on the police, really, because I feel like the police in the US, they've got so much free reign, and they're so protected. They're so protected in the US, and they can't. It's almost like I kind of feel that they're scared if they started convicting police officers, or if they started like giving police officers that do police brutality, life without parole. They kind of feel that. I feel that they're kind of scared that might like dismantle their own kind of law and order system.
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Yeah,
but I think it needs. I think the law definitely needs to change. I think they need to. I think they need to start being hard. I think they need to start really being firm on the police force.
You know, I get what you're saying in terms of the law changing. I think there's two elements of it. There can be many things that are unlawful, but if these laws are not actually imposed, I think that's even another issue in itself. what you'll find is, let's say, for instance, the stand your ground law, which is what was used for Trayvon Martin, whereby you'll get one citizen that can use that law and kill someone and get away with it. But I know in the same state, another black person had the same situation and tried to use that law, but they didn't count it. They didn't see his reasons as deemed as usable. And that's the other thing about the whole manipulating of the law, in terms of you can instate certain laws, but how they're used is the whole nother different thing. And even the legalese that they use around it, they do leave some ambiguity in their wording, so that a lot of the decision can be made with the judge. So the judge can also have some kind of final say in how he carries out that law or conviction.
But in Trayvon's case, that was a jury-led trial. He was, this wasn't a case whereby George Zimmerman committed this offense and wasn't charged. He literally walked away. He was charged and went to court. He was just acquitted. So, the system worked to some degree in that they apprehended him, charged him, took him to court, but it was just getting over that final hurdle of convicting him. What went wrong? What did the prosecution not do right in order to get that conviction? What did the defense do to get that acquittal? It's those little things there.
Cam, thank you for adding that. There's also a question here which kind of alludes to what you've kind of mentioned here from Chica and Marvin. The question is, so let's discuss what specific ongoing measures we should strive for to make systemic reform of the police, judicial system, and political decision makers. So I guess this is then being thrown back on us, is that if you want to change, what kind of change should be put in place? Because I know we've discussed around how the police are protected, how America is a law and order kind of society. And these are some of the rhetorics I saw that kind of like Trump is actually kind of, he's actively kind of pushing out there, arming the police officers, getting them more equipment. But for instance, for COVID-19, they were not able to get enough equipment for their nurses, which then actually just adds to your comment that you mentioned, William, regarding American being more predominantly law and order. So yeah, the question is, what measures should we strive for to make systemic reform of the police, judicial system, and political decision makers, decision makers? Anyone has any opinion on that question though?
Let me just...
It's got to do with our economy, if I could chime in there. I really feel like it's a case that we need to get our economy right, get our communities right, so that we're actually in a position where, not that we're just, because like I watched, like, let's say, a video that kind of explained it quite well. And it's a case that we need to not only vote for politicians, but be in a position where we're actually sponsoring politicians and sponsoring what they're actually putting in place for legislations and for laws. So once we do that, then we're in a better position, because we've got someone that's actually working for us, that's making laws, making sure that the police are doing the right thing.
Does that include like lobbying, I'm guessing? Do you reckon lobbying will help?
It's not even just lobbying. It's just a case that if we actually have people in the system that are free-minded, because now we've got black people in the system, yes, we've got black people in politics, but unfortunately, we don't have a community that they can come back to and say, yes, I'm doing it for you. You guys are going to protect me. So if I do change these laws, if I do these things that is putting my neck out on the line, I've got a community that's backing me, that I know I can run back to, and it's going to shelter me for doing those active things. But right now, we actually unfortunately don't have that. So it's very hard because I know certain people even look at Obama and say, Obama didn't really do anything for, the black people in America. But who was going to protect him if he did anything? We know about the stories about JFK, that obviously he tried to do certain things to help people, but as soon as he did that, his life got taken. So we need to actually have that foundation so we can actually build. And through that building is when we're going to actually start making those systematic, changes that would.
So like an infrastructure, basically. An infrastructure, would you say? Like some sort of like legitimate organization to support and make change and help lobby change the laws. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Guys, I've got a lot of questions here, Mo.
Hold on,
a lot of people want to get involved. So
Coach, I just want to follow on in terms of the whole economic side of things. I mean, in terms of economics and actually wanting freedom or some kind of reform in laws and stuff, if we look back at history, the only evidence where you've seen certain reforms change is because of big, large rebellions. So let's say if you take it back to 1831, when Jamaica started burning down all the plantations and stuff, it was only because of those loss of property and costs, those economic loss of costs, that the UK then decided to do the whole Slavery Act in 1833. If you look back at the whole civil rights period, it was only when they started doing the boycotts and actually affecting costs of money and economy, then you saw that they introduced the actual Civil Rights Act. And I find what you find with a lot of these governments is, unless the cost of economic rebellion is higher than their profits of oppression, will you see freedoms or reforms in that sense. I do get what you mean by in terms of some kind of structure in the community, but a lot of the times, especially on the voting angle, is something that is really developed over years, and it really needs some kind of serious group kind of infrastructure tactic.
Can I quickly chime in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so because I know what you're saying about obviously burning down the plantations is what caused them to change certain things. And for those time being, or for that time, I feel like that was the best thing for them to do, of course. But now we're in a position that we're actually owning things. You know, we've got black people that are millionaires, that are billionaires. So it's not a case that, you know, we want to be in that same position where, you know, we're begging them to do a change now. We need to, not we need to, but my idea of it is that we need to actually be in a position where we can stand up for ourselves now. Like, stop being able to come into our communities, do something to us, and we're not able to do anything. We actually still have to go back out there and say, oh, not white people, but people, please look at what your other people are doing. There's no other nation that basically does that. You know, we're the only unfortunate community that actually has to still do that. And that's what I'm trying to say. Yes, we have to do it before because we didn't necessarily own anything, but now we're starting to own things. So it's a case that we need to get back into that, build our communities so that no one can actually come to our house and, you know, kill us and get away with it just so easily. And that's what I believe is going to make the change. If that makes sense.
Cool. At this point, so Chica and Marvin, I know you've put a few questions here. I read one of them out. Let me know if you want to kind of chime in here and make your point.
Yeah, I'm online. Marvin's online right now.
Cool.
I submit the question, and listening to the feedback that we've had, I just want to just touch on each point that we've just had very quickly. The opportunity that we have here with what has happened is, one, to seek direct justice for the case, and two, to use, more like what Mo said, the momentum of the protests and some of the threat of damage to the economy and certain structures in place to build on it and make systematic updates to the way the systems are working. Not just systems like the justice system, but also the way corporations are working, the way schools is working, the way health is working. I want to be thinking about this as the impetus for changing all of these particular areas. For instance, last week I get contacted by a councillor who in his department is responsible for business, and they have to run an under the table discussion with me and various other businesses around how to set up a Black Chamber of Commerce. I was like, how do we not have one? They were like, no, we don't have one. And this, when all of the back to work plans and political agendas in place to come out and go back, they can go to various different bodies and get the messages out consulted on and put out very quickly. We don't have that. He sat in his room and said, I need to get this done. So that's where I got the call to start raising up the businesses to come to the table, to start having that discussion so we can have a body that is organized from educating them about what we need, as well as, so to inform the agenda, as well as to then go the other way and get the agenda delivered. I feel like we have an opportunity to inform and go up, and we have the ability to empower and go the other way. To a certain extent, we need to establish ourselves first and then make some demands. Right now, we're not established enough, but this is where we're at right now, in my view. And what I made about the, driving laws and driving strategic groups up and down the country, when I work with government, as a consultant, I realized that they would have a body that draws in funds and creates agenda, and then start spreading that out to all these different strategic partnerships they got up and down the country that interfere with what their local agenda is. Okay, we need to deal with the schools here, we need to deal with the businesses over here, we need to start, in my view, use this opportunity to create strategic bodies so that we generate a voice on a collective scale that can't be ignored.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Now, I feel like,
My question is, yeah, how do we work together? My question, how do we work together? Because this is what my issue is. I've been trying to elaborate on this situation constantly. How do we work together?
So
Can I
just
step
before
in
we
on
move
that?
on to
Sorry.
that question though, Clark wanted to come
Yeah.
in. Sorry, Clark, man. I know you've been
No,
waiting.
yeah, sorry. So Mama comes in with everything that you lot are saying now as well, yeah. So I believe that what you lot aren't getting to is we don't have a voice. And what Ali, I can hear you're saying is, how do we get to that? Like in all of the revolutions that you've seen, or things that you see from going long way back, there's a leader, okay? With the leaders, you've had the Malcolm X, you've had these sort of people that they have their strategy that they're pushing through, but it's for a collective at the same time, okay? So with a leader, the problem you can have is they can be bought. Do you get what I'm saying? They can not have your sort of agenda set. But what you're saying here is you've got all these big businesses, you've got everything that you need there, but they don't even have a voice. We don't even have the media on our side. Just like Mo was saying at the beginning, you catch everything going on, but they haven't used the word murder in the media, because that would actually address exactly what it is and what we feel, but it isn't being put across to most people that are sitting in the middle, because they're not given, we haven't got the voice that gives it the way that we want to, and we're not focusing on having that voice. That voice can be in a leader, that voice can be in just media. Jewish people have a media that they listen to, that they have for themselves, that shows and identifies their needs. It shows them what they need to do. With that, it can organize, it can form things for, like, as a whole community, as Black people. If you had one media that people knew to go to for certain things, let's not crowd it, let's not do anything else, because the media that we're using now, it's using distracting points, it's using the violence to distract people, it's making it look as if we're not structured. Most of the riot things that you saw yesterday that were coming out in the media, that were there, they said, listen, most of the things that would happen, it would be like maybe 2-3 minutes of unrest, but the media would view it, and perception of it is like it happened throughout the whole thing, the whole protest, like there were riots, and it wasn't that. There was key videos that I saw where the horse is the one that took the police officer off, but at first I was hearing that the riots is the one that took the police officer off the horse, and it was literally he ran into a traffic light. You know, where it's like it's how it's perceived by us all. So we're distracted. You've got to understand, the media is the one that puts in our faces different idols, because they know that they aren't anything. The real idols, the media would rather tarnish, and they'll use to, in a sense, like smear them so we don't listen to them. So they'll distract us with things like, this person isn't for the cause because of something they done when they were 16. Like, really, everyone's come a long way from when we're 16. And that there, like Ali, what you were just about to push through is like, we need a voice for it. We need something. We need the one voice for it that will tell us, everybody, the protest should be peaceful, that everybody chill today, we're waiting for the answer. Without the answer of what they're doing in America, they can use it to their advantage. With everything that's been coming out lately in regards to George Floyd, if we had waited with all the violence, they would have had to come. If there was just silence, in silence, there's tension in the room, someone would want to talk. And with the silence, that is fear to a lot of white people. I'm so sorry. When Black people are actually silent, it means we're thinking. We're not going to come with the violence because we're thinking of a better approach. And they would have come forward with something in the sense of like trying to give us more in the sense of the George Floyd thing before anything else comes out. But they're distracting us with their media and showing us different things. That's all I can say.
Can I just chime in though? Because I just wanted to say, yeah, Clark, I agree with the points that you're saying as well, because I feel like it is a case of in the UK, I think we don't have it's an organization or a network that has any real political clout or any real media clout that's able to push a narrative and speak on behalf of the community. You talk about things like when all that stuff was going on in Labour about anti-Semitism, and you know, you had organizations within the Jewish community kicking off. You know, they were tarnishing the Labour Party, bringing it all to the media. You were having debates on radio and everything about it, you know, and as a result, that, you know, that put the Labour Party in an unfavorable light. Same thing, you know, in terms of like, when you look back in the history of America and certain things that they achieved, they had organizations. They had the Civil Rights Organization. They have the NAACP. Even to the point where some of these organizations create sort of events and create black, you know, things of images of black media within America to convey certain messages. I don't think we have that in the UK, and I feel like because of that, I think a lot of things have happened to the black community in the UK. You can think of a wealth of examples. The most recent one to memory for me is the Windrush scandal. You know, when that happened, you know, and all of that came out, that was going on for ages. And there was no group to even push the narrative of what was going on or happening in the community.
Yeah, you know what?
I can agree with that.
I know I was speaking with Christina, who is the founder of Shades of Beauty, and she is all in the hair and beauty kind of industry, and how one of the things that she highlighted to me that in our community we've lost, we did have it back in the day, is our own media. So things like The Voice, for some reason, that isn't as big as it was back in the day, maybe because they may not have moved with the times in terms of updating. But we had things like Choice FM, which was brought out. So yeah, we don't actually have any actual proper media outlet for our community, and that is a big deal, because that is literally how, let's say during the Martin Luther King times, they had newspapers, they had radio stations, black-owned ones, or media outlets, which they were using to get information out. That's one of the reasons how the Nation of Islam also grew, because of their media outlets and how they communicated and put their information out. I did want to ask Kojo if there was any other comments or anything to follow on from there, just so we can kind of keep it moving at the same time.
There are a lot of comments. I think I've got Ollie here. Ollie, is this something that you wanted to come in to talk about, or you're just fine? Actually, when I ask this question, I'm not sure what to expect, whether you just come in to speak or I just read out your comments. So this is what Ollie said. There is enough black wealth out there. We need to be supporting black-owned businesses. We need to build strong economic systems. We need distribution centers, so we are not having to rely on the system that is currently in place. Look, other communities, Jewish, Asian, yes, there is systematic racism, but again, black-owned banks, trust within your own communities, I believe is what. Ollie, if this is something you wanted to add to, just let me know. I think the conversation around leadership is very interesting to me. And because I feel like myself and Mo, we went
Coach, Ollie did want to comment on it.
Ollie okay, I was going to steal his life.
Hello, everyone. All I wanted to say, we got to build trust within our own community first, because that's what I think discombobulates us. We just don't trust each other. That's my first thing. We've first got to build trust within our community, and then we can build on that. Yes, we can go out and protest on a day-to-day basis. That's the first point, to get our voice heard. However, what do we do after that? I think we need to start sort of investing within our communities, basically, and stop buying from other shops and whatever. I just think, invest in our communities.
That's the reason why I'm asking, how do we work together? This is all down to it.
We got to start trusting one another. There's too much disenfranchisement between each community, whether we're from Jamaica, from Africa. Everyone feels that, we're just not connected. We're not congealed enough. You look at the Jewish community. Yes, they went through the Holocaust. Yes, we did go through slavery, but they seem to build up their communities. Why can't we? Stop being jealous of one person. If you see a man with a big car, instead of saying, well done, you're looking at him and saying, he must be a drug dealer. Where is this mentality come from? The mindset's got to change. Everybody's mindset's got to change. We've got to be more tighter.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I know EE just mentioned some comments in regards to basically us creating our own businesses and things like that. But then in the end, we kind of take that check from the bigger companies and sell them, for example, Choice FM and selling. In terms of solutions of coming together, I would say that there are a lot of groups out there that have set up, and people have started to create groups and communities for a lot of our people to work together and do things and keep in hand. I think for me, from what I've noticed, is our attention span to continue in that journey is what falls off, particularly even in regards to the whole Mark Duggan situation and what happened in 2011. I know during that time, there was this exact same conversation. Let's create let's support black businesses. Let's do this and that. I did a lot of those things. I put a lot of those, I did a lot of what you call group economics, creating those kind of groups. And it's just, as it came out of the media, as it died out in the media, people's attentions also died down over time. For example, you know, H&M did that whole piece of the boy in the monkey jumper or something like that. I myself haven't shopped at H&M since then, neither myself or my partner. But I know a lot of people have forgotten about things like that and still gone back to H&M. Gucci did the whole blackface thing and whatever with their products. People are still going. It's people's attention, unfortunately, as much as they are well-intentioned, it's just over time, once these things aren't in your face so much and you get comfortable, you just kind of lose that kind of importancy of doing that. And so that's why I do really think the whole black media thing is important, and how we can all actually try and get that up so that there is that constant communication between the community to keep those interests going and keep those kind of things happening.
Can I just say something? So just very, very briefly. So Ollie, I agreed a lot with a lot of what you said in terms of like building up that level of trust in the community. And like my theory is that I feel like it's something that's an approach that needs to be filtered down to the younger generation in terms of like indoctrinating them to believe those sort of things, because I think we can do as much as we can to create some form of unification, but I think these things can be taught to a generation. And I feel like a lot of the young people that are coming up, especially with the awareness that's being brought now with a lot of the Black Lives Matters, kids in primary school, early teens, that sort of stuff, I feel like there needs to be an organized approach to sort of educate them and indoctrinate them in terms of being able to support black movements, to support black businesses, to grow, to create and grow black businesses, to understand. Like I'm just thinking, even like in terms of like when I was in school, in primary school, I wasn't taught anything about black history or black slavery or anything. Same thing in secondary school. I knew not, I wasn't anything about black history. I had to go and find it in a book. I was educated in the UK, and they didn't teach a single thing about black history, about where we came from, and even like the UK's history, regarding slavery. And that same information I received, the same information that a lot of white kids received as well. So I feel like a lot of awareness wasn't brought to the trauma, the psychological trauma that black people have experienced over a significant period of time. And even in the case of white people understanding that, I feel like if they weren't taught that stuff in school, and they may very well have not been taught that stuff at home, how are they supposed to understand the issues that, or change their behaviors in terms of how they behave towards us or how they react towards us? Or
yeah, sorry, I've been wanting to come in here, mate. So there's been a few things I just wanted to touch on. I think one of it was around the whole leadership. I think we've discussed around having some sort of leadership, or we don't have that one person that kind of unites us together. And I think it's interesting that we say that, because I feel like we've seen through generations, we've seen through history has taught us that leaders are easy to get rid of. So for instance, we had Martin Luther King, we had Malcolm X. Even you could go back all the way to the independence that a lot of African countries gained. You had someone like Kwame Nkrumah. And we have been to a debate before, myself and Mo. We went to Dope Black Dads. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it. But in there, one of the guys that was giving like a presentation talked about leadership and ideology and what the differences are. So in his kind of opinion, and what he kind of shared with us, was to say that leadership is great because it kind of brings everyone together. But normally what they have understood is that all they have to do is just get rid of the leader in order for that campaign and that momentum to kind of die down. Yeah. And this is clearly what we've seen. Martin Luther King, you could even go back to say the Elijah Muhammad, when you're talking about the whole Nation of Islam and the way he set up that structure. It was very, very important. So these are things that have been done in the past. Kwame Nkrumah kind of went through the same kind of issue where you had the former George Bush Sr., who was the head of the CIA, kind of making sure that Kwame Nkrumah was ousted in Ghana. And the whole idea with ideology, I feel like we need to have an idea, or we need to have an unexpected outcome, something that we could all buy into. The reason why I feel that it's important is because when you have that ideology, it's something that you could pass on. So for instance, an example of this ideology, Kwame Nkrumah always spoke about something called the African state. It's like uniting Africa to be like a one in order to be able to fight with, or to be able to be in a better bargaining power against the Western kind of markets and stuff. And the whole idea of that is something that's being kind of rejuvenated, because sometimes we go around in circles and then we realize that this thing has always been there. Someone has always been propagating for us to do this. So I feel like the leadership is important, but the ideology in regard to having that whole collective kind of goal, or the collective understanding, is very important. When you look at the case of the UK and you look at the case of Black people, I feel like a lot of the times we do ourselves an injustice. And this is something I saw that I think myself and Mo have gone back and forth on this conversation a lot as well. In a sense that when we're looking at Black people and we're expecting Black people to behave the same as the Jews, for instance, our journey is not the same. So what I mean by our journey is not the same, the Jewish, Mo could most probably add to this at the end of my kind of thing. They have one language, they have one religion. Remember, they were giving reparations, plus they were giving land. Now, when you're looking at Africa, or you're looking at Black people in general, in Africa, there's 52 different countries. Within each country, there's all sorts of different tribes. We have kind of migrated and we've come over to a Western world. And we come to the Western world and we meet the Caribbeans. We also experience African Americans. Now, this is a melting pot of so many different things, so many different kind of even thinking. Well, I remember going to school. I know we're talking about roots here, but I remember going to school and watching these kind of roots, how uncomfortable it made me feel. I remember some sort of the stereotypical views that I kind of felt in school, the prejudice that I felt from my own people, from the Caribbeans, some of the name callings, fresh out the boat, all these kind of stuff. And what made me, why I'm saying this is that maybe we need to get to a point where we get to understand each other in the first place. Because I don't feel like Black people, we understand each other. I don't feel like we understand each other's struggle. And that kind of, I feel like, is what kind of divides us in a lot of times. But that division that we keep talking about, we need to understand also that it's weighty. It's coming from a lot of different places. And until now, and I feel like we are on the right track, because we're having a conversation where we have so many different people involved from different backgrounds. And this is where I feel like we need to start. The comparison at the moment, I don't feel like it should be the same, because we haven't gone through the same thing. Slavery was over 400 years, and it's not the same for some of the experiences, the bad experiences that have happened historically against the Jews. So I feel like that's also something that we have to bear in mind, that we do ourselves an injustice sometimes when we make these kind of comparisons.
Yeah, I share your sentiments, and I do definitely agree. As a community, we need to strengthen our understanding of each other and growing together. And I genuinely do believe, there was one person that mentioned earlier in terms of learning and education, and we have had a big Saturday school Pan-African community growing up throughout the years. It's just, it was never really supported by our community as much. And I feel that's something we need to take back ourselves, in terms of let us educate our children. And it's from when we start educating our children that then we start to build these connections and these communications and all these sort of things to support each other. I do understand everything needs money, and in terms of costs and expenses, but I do understand also in economics, the more numbers, the more people, then the less it's going to hurt you in terms of cost, and the more you can support each other. And there are actually, in terms of reading and knowledge, in terms of communities and stuff, there is access to funding to set up certain community projects or events. This is something I'm familiar with. I've done charities and stuff like that, and building certain community projects. So it's not something that can't be done. It's just, again, in a sense of, can we have that discipline to continue and keep things going and carry on in that sense? I did want to open up to any other one that makes any comment or add in.
I mean, like Mo, I think I hear what you're saying. What I'd like to ask you is that there has been a number of like Black education workshops that's happened throughout the years in different parts of like London and outside London, a lot of courses and stuff. Do you think that maybe we lack, that there hasn't been like something of scale that everyone can go to? Does that make sense? Like, for example, like there was always like, so I was born in Walthamstow, and there was like a Black History like evening every other week where you can go learn about a different person, a different like famous Black person, like every other week. But that was only for my area, and I'm sure Marvin will say there probably was some kind of like positive like kind of Black kind of workshop in his area, but it's always in pockets. Do you think that maybe the problem is there's not something of scale that everyone who is Black can benefit from?
I agree with you definitely on that. There should be some kind of way of definitely linking or building that even more. And I think, like we mentioned before, in terms of the media, I really do believe the media aspect is a big thing. So let it be, now we've got access to things like social media and stuff like that. I know near where I lived, there was another kind of Saturday Pan-African school, but no one really knew about it. It just wasn't really talked about. And I think that was kind of lacking. Maybe it was something on their part that they didn't promote it enough, or it was something on some of the parents' part that wasn't pushing it out to other kids and things like that. But I know from speaking to a lot of people that have Saturday schools, what they will say is their biggest thing is, let's say you'll get parents that are happy to commit at the beginning and make that small, some do small contributions like £2 a week and things like that, but it's the continuance. Other distractions in other people's lives, I'm not picking on anyone or anything like that, but a lot of parents don't just continue that, and the less people that come and less people that continue, the harder it is to continue those things, even to source outside funding to support it, because they have too few kids or people attending, or even volunteers supporting to teach the kids in that sense. But so it really is a big, more community sense in terms of how you can support those businesses in all different areas. Everyone will need to play their part in something like that.
Mo,
Can I just
Mo,
comment
can I
real
just-
quickly? Sorry, guys. There's a few people that want to there's a few questions that we haven't kind of gone through yet. Stephen, you put a question up here. Just let me know if you want to kind of share this with the team. I think what you've got here is did Stephen respond? Are you coming in, Stephen?
Yeah, no, I'm on. So go ahead, bro.
Sorry, go ahead. You could elaborate on the question that you posed to us.
Okay, so for me, hearing a lot, this is a very, very interesting conversation. I guess where I've always struggled to completely understand this is in terms of, it's always about the timing, and it's always timing. But for me, this is one of the biggest things where we've always struggled to fall is organization and discipline. We were speaking earlier about having, a complete media outlet, or, why when Labour spoke of anti-Semitism, and this was also so powerful. But what we need to understand is that the Jewish people within themselves as a community are a very powerful community because they invest within their community. And I know we've been talking about it, and it sounds great about what we need to do, i.e. investing in, our own and what that looks like. But when we actually strip that really back to the bare bones in terms of what that looks like and how we look to get people involved, this is where all things start to fall apart. So in terms of, a big part of why Labour had to act quickly is because it wasn't that the Jewish community were making noise. They were pulling their money, they were pulling resources, and they were making things very difficult for a lot of these politicians, a lot of these businesses out here that people had to react. The problem is with us as a community, and I think everyone has touched on it in some, whether it's trust or whether it's just understanding identity and all of these things. But for me, the two biggest things where we've always struggled is regards to organization and discipline. How we look to organize ourselves as a community. There have been moments throughout history that have showed that when we have become organized, or when we have shown discipline, that we've been able to. So when we have been able to do these things, what we've actually seen, I don't know whether there's two key histories that I want to highlight. One of them is a place called Greenwood, which was is known as the Black Wall Street. And what this was is that post-slavery, where a number of slaves who are now free were unable to shop at certain white shops or get jobs in certain things, they set up a whole entire community. And in that community, it was very, like I said, disciplined and organized. It took a number of years, but what happened, it was very much thriving. And this is where we had their own banks, dentists, grocery stores, and they actually didn't need anything. And people were very quick to see in terms of, you know what, guys, we need to dismantle this because they are very quickly capturing on. There's also another key story, which is known as Freeman's Bank. And Freeman's Bank is post-slavery, where a number of slaves were given to, let's say, take it compensation. I don't know in terms of what the exact number was, but a certain amount of money, and everyone pooled their cash and their economic funds together, which allowed them to create their own institution in terms of whether it's the Black Bank and all this kind of stuff like that. But what it is that when we look further back and we talk about there's a big difference between racism as such, and this is one of the key things, and institutional racism. Economic power is where we look to define ourselves. We are such a big factor when it comes to our spending power, but because we disperse it amongst everyone else, we are not taken seriously. And we talk about, when we look at exactly like the strongest communities, whether it's Chinese, Asian, and Jewish, it's everything is done within house. Everything is done in house, you know. And what I've come to realize is that it has to start from a collective and the coming together. And this is, you know, to Ollie's point earlier, where it's a case of the hatred or of this person can't be better than me, or what it takes. But once we're able to organize ourselves, and more importantly, and this is the most important word, say discipline, because what we're trying to do is that, guys, we have a voice. We you know, people are posting, people are protesting, and it's all well and good. But what I'm trying to say is that the long-term change of what is required here, it's going to take so much more than that. And what that requires from each and every individual, and that's whether removing your funds from the Gucci's and investing in other Black businesses, or whether it's going back into, or whether it's coming as a collective and investing your money in a pool of something to create some sort of change. This is where the difference is. Everyone, what we're saying is that as a Black people, what we don't realize, we are rising as individuals, and everyone's doing great things in their own silo and in their own particular lane. But when you bring that all together, that's when you'll really start to see the change. You know, people say, "Oh, many drops of water makes a mighty ocean." It's only once we move together as a collective, and in an organized and, more importantly, disciplined way, is that when all of these things will start to come into place.
Can I ask a question, Stephen?
Please.
Yeah, I think you raised a really good point that we all are rising individually nicely over the years. We definitely, I think, as a race, especially in the UK, I think we've all progressed positively in the last decade. Do you think that we suffer from crabs in a barrel mentality, and that's the reason why we haven't come together as an organisation yet? Do you think that's part of the problem?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. First of all, great question. But what I actually believe, I don't want to start going into this whole teaching. Do you guys, I don't know whether anyone on this line is familiar with something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So in terms of the crabs in a barrel aspect now, what it is, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what it does, it describes the different levels in which an individual needs in order to become a whole entire individual. And there are 5 different levels, and it starts with the basics of, you know, air, water, shelter. These are things, and then it moves to second level, which is, you know, security, employment, resources. Then it gets to, and then the third level is, you know, friendship, intimacy, family. The fourth level is respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. Bearing in mind that's the fourth level, and the fifth level is called self-actualization, which is the desire to become more than one can be. So in terms of the crabs in a barrel, like, the reason why systemic and institutional racism have been so powerful is because what they've tried to do is strip us from those things and make us get to the point where we can't be more than we can. And I don't want to get all biblical, but obviously, you know what I mean, I can assume the silence on here is you guys clearly want me to do so. But we speak about, you know, very early on in the Bible where there are a number of people and they're climbing up the tower and they're building a tower that is going to get them to heaven. And God says, you know what? I need to confuse these people so they can't understand each other. And once they don't understand each other, there's no common goal, there's no plan, and then there's confusion spread amongst the place. Once that has been done, That's it. Now, so now when we look at the crab in the barrel mentality, the reason why is because people don't understand what it means to come together. I say us as Black people has always been he's better than me, and it's always been in terms of if I don't, he will, and how we look at and how we tend to look at things. But if we really are able to strip it back, it's about even in terms of, I can't remember what there was a slave master, and he talked about how you, and you know, I'm sure we've seen it at some point, but he talks categorically how you break down one's mentality, even in terms of, you know, how you remove the head of the household, a man, or you know, abuse him in front of his wife, you know what I mean, or in front of his female and his children, so they know, so he loses respect. And what you actually do was that when you start to normalize things, even when we think about the killings and all these videos that we see and how we've become desensitized to those things, this is all part of the bigger picture. But it's about understanding is that this is the whole plan of what it is. And even though, you know, slavery on quote unquote ended, you know, XYZ how many years ago, the slave, if you can enslave someone from the mind, you don't actually need them in handcuffs. You don't actually need to, but if I can get you to think that you're less than what you are, I'm able to control the narrative. Even when it comes to the point of, I mean, I think recently we were talking about the riot, this whole, you know, I'm sure everyone's seen Madeleine, is it Madeleine McCain?
Oh yeah.
All of a sudden now, we had one of the most fundamental moments in London, across the UK for Black Lives Matter. And then all of a sudden, there may be listen, guys, you need to understand what I'm about to say. There may be a lead that may show that this girl taken 20 years ago might be alive. Don't piss me off. I don't want to go down. I'm not going to go down.
You know, I hear exactly what you're saying, and it's really your input is appreciated, definitely.
More, please. I've got people waiting here. There's been some comments.
Just to let you know, we are closing off soon. So anyone that does want to make any comments, please make it quickly and succinctly, because
Mo, guys, I'm just going to finish with one thing, just so you guys know. So the reason why I'm so passionate about this, I'm part of a group called Cornerstone. Cornerstone now, started 5 years ago, just so you know, and it consists of 20 Black people who have invested their own money up to £50,000 each, which will bring us to £1 million by the end of this year. And we fundamentally invest our own money into Black and diverse founders, as in ownership. So what it is, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is, guys, like, you're talking to someone who has nearly 40K of his own money over 5 years, of an organization which I started, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. But the point of what I'm trying to say is that, guys, ownership of wherever it is, whether it's the narrative, whether it's the business, whether it's equity, that is where now the initial change starts. But going, I'm out. Guys, great.
What I would say though, please leave those details with us so we could share with this podcast when it goes out, and we could have.
Problem.
Yeah, you can share it in the chat as well.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say though, I know Dorothy's been making some comments on here. Dorothy, is it a good time to come in to share your thoughts with us on some of the points that's been raised so far?
Hi.
Hey.
I mean, I've made my points in the chat, but you can. I don't know. Yeah, I've made my points in the chat, but I just to say, I just think we need a leader. I think all this is well and good, but you need people to lead, because as Stephen was saying, you know, a lot of people are doing things individually, but all kind of great changes had a leader or a group of people that led it. Otherwise, everyone's just going to do their own thing, and there's just going to be lots of individual victories, but not really a collective, not a collective victory. That's what I was saying.
Thanks for sharing. Ali, I know you wanted to come in here.
Well, Stephen and Dorothy, all of you are saying very important thing. The leadership, from my hindsight to it, is if it's never worked before, I don't think it will work now, because people are scared of what the past has happened. And moving forward, it's not about leadership. What it is about organization, as what Cam addressed. So it's all about organization. So, for example, there's a lot of people us in this group here. We all have a business, and it's an organization. We're underneath the umbrella as the organization. So no matter what, we are giving something to the organization. So we as a collective, then we know that it's like you know, like when you're having a group of people, every month you're putting money into it, and then at the end you give that money to one person, So imagine that as a business now, when you know you're registered to this organization, no matter what, you're giving something. So that organization now will probably give it to the community, and then that community can benefit from it. So, but when you have a leadership, the leadership, somehow something goes wrong, way left or way right. And then what, as Stephen has highlighted, it perfectly makes sense of everything what we're doing. Literally, it's all about race. What we're doing right now is all good, but if we don't work as a team, Africa don't work as a team, in the next 50 years and 100 years, our race will be gone. Just remember that. Let that sink in. That's why now we need to work as a team. We need to stop the hatred, the jealousy. You see the hatred and the jealousy? We need to put that to another race, not to our race. At this moment on this earth, I'm sorry, our race will be done. We need to wake up. This time of this 21st century, if we Black people do not wake up and work together, we are done. Our race is done. That's all I have to add into that.
Can I just quickly jump in, and some of that Ali mentioned about, you know, people putting all money in together, and then one person gets it. Now, my granny and my great grand started a partner when they first come from Jamaica, and that's how they bought their property. It was a community back then, like, you know, the Windrush generation. I don't see why we can't do something like that. If we had like a Black-owned banks or something like that, we put our money into our Black-owned banks. That's how we start. You know, the partner is that little tool. The partner was so it changed so many Black Jamaicans. I only can talk from Jamaican perspective. That's where I'm from. It changed so many of their lives that they can buy their own properties just through working tight as a community, and no one sort of like, you know, missing, throwing a hand. And it really did work. Why can't we do it? I don't think there's any partners going around anymore. That helps so many Black people get on the property ladder you wouldn't believe. That's just my little thing.
Yeah, totally agree. Something I'm involved in as well with some of my work colleagues who are from the Caribbean.
I did kind of want to just bring it back in terms of to everything that's kind of happening now, in terms of what's people's thoughts of people, the reactions that are happening, the riots. Well, I call it a rebellion. Yeah, told you, language is key. Rebellion is what is happening, especially considering the terrorists that have been attacking us and the murder of George Floyd. Yeah, I just wanted to get what you guys' thoughts are on that as we close, as we kind of conclude discussion.
What's the question?
So yeah, it's just more in terms of everything that's been happening now. I know there was marches and protests today. There was some yesterday, which a lot of people went on towards. Is this something that we should be continuing? Should we be doing lots of different things at different times? Some do marching, some do protesting, some talk about infrastructure and kind of laying down policies and attacking certain government bodies. I feel that we can be doing all these things at the same time. There's no reason why we should stop doing one thing and not continue something else. I feel if we can attack on all multiple angles, then we can definitely reach the kind of reform that we want for our community in that sense.
Yeah, I agree. Like, this is a moment. Like, this is definitely a moment. I feel it's a watershed moment, and I think that we've come a long way, but I think there's more work to be done, and I do think we can get to a point where Black people is equal and we refuse to be mistreated, as Marvin eloquently put it. But I do agree that we need to do different things, and some things can take 2 minutes, some things can be free, some things will cost a lot of money, and some things will take 20 years. But and I think all of us in this group and people that are not Black can help. But I also believe that, I guess, to get past the finish line, I do think that, yeah, we do need more organisation, because I've been having these conversations with people all the time, and it's the same thing. We need to get organised. We need to support Black businesses, but unfortunately, it's fallen on deaf. You know, it's fallen on deaf ears. This has been going on for 20 years now. So I'd like to see, to be honest, I would like to see. I'm willing to any organisation that you know about. I'm willing to join. I believe that we can progress forward in every sense of the way, in every area of society, but we do need more organisation. How we get organisation, I'm not too sure, but I'm willing to open and listen to other people's views. And also what Stephen said about getting out of the prison of your mind, I think that's also what Black people need to do as well. Because I do feel that a lot of us are stuck in our head, are stuck in a mental prison. And I think we need to get out if we want to progress as well.
Yeah, but Ken, sorry, that's Marvin speaking. Sorry, William. Yeah, no, but on that point, yeah, sorry, we know each other. But on that point is that the scenario is, with everybody keep talking about we need this person and that person, what about ourselves? Yeah, because there's many things we can do, whether it's, look, Mo's already been doing them. He mentioned he's been out there doing programs, who's supporting? And he was out there putting the leadership out, and who's following up? So as much as you see it, you need to get behind it, but at the same time, you're looking for somebody else. Clark mentioned it as well. He's been on this point about, strategic groups and leadership and having an organization. At the end of the day, there's stuff we can do. Mo's already told you, if you want to do something locally, there's funding programs. You take it, you look at the government, your local council strategy, you look at the directorate that they're in, there's community director, arts director, whatever it is, they're going to go there, funding, bang. You put in a funding proposal, you get it done for 10 to 12 weeks, you prove the numbers, you go again. Okay, if you wanted to deal with the media, we're talking about starting up a newspaper. If we want it tomorrow, we can go to networks that's already there. We got new media on Smash. We can go out to Instagram. We can go to, I don't know, Color Network. They got like 30,000. Say, yo, how can we add to this so that we can put you in a column, so that we can pressure for a column somewhere in this newspaper and that newspaper to make sure that we still got an ongoing voice in the existing media. If we wanted to affect educational change, we can go to one of those programs and start looking at teachers we may know and start to get into that conversation about how we can come and do. William, you've come and done, I've done it as well. How many universities and schools you've spoken at? You see what I'm saying? To come in and start putting your views across and start galvanizing the minds of young and hungry people right now who's hungry for change. So I know we're pressed for time, but I thought I'd just mention that anyway. Change begins with all of us.
Cool. At this point here, sorry, Archie, if you don't mind just sharing your thoughts on some of the conversations we've had on the chat, that would be great.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Listening to everyone, I completely agree with what's been, the sentiments that have been shared. And one thing that I have kind of struggled with a lot of the protests, the movements, the rebellion, is how overt it is. I feel like in Britain, whenever true change succeeds, it's usually something that happens without anyone even knowing when it started. And with many movements that are happening right now, I feel like it's very easy for the police or whatever power. I feel like it's very easy for the powers that be to shut things down because they can see exactly what's happening. They know exactly where to push. Now, I've been speaking to a few people about the way that in British history, some things have become mainstream. So I don't know if you all remember when we were growing up, we used to have lessons on how to cross the road. And there was that phrase, stop, look and listen. And it stuck in all our minds and we all knew, this is how we're going to do things. And I feel like if we were to develop some initiatives, we almost need to change behaviors by promoting good behaviors without necessarily letting people know where we're coming from. Because even when people use, the examples that we should look up to of communities that have managed to progress, they didn't necessarily do it as overtly as we're currently relying on. And that's not to say that the movement should stop. I think we should have everything going at the same time, but we should also have things that we are supporting and strengthening that are protected from attacks, because we make them almost invisible. We make them just our way of life, as opposed to something that people can come and knock down before we've even started.
Preach!
Excellent.
No, sorry. Let me quickly come in. Sorry, that's exactly what I was trying to tell you at the beginning. I was saying, it's like there's most things that we actually need help as a Black community from. Okay, and I put it up in the notes. I said, listen, if your child has been abused by the police, yeah, the first thing the police are going to do is trying to make it look like your child's the wrong one. That's the first thing. But there's nowhere that anyone can actually go to, okay? If there was a place that we could actually go to that makes police accountable, they would be afraid of doing it to just anyone, not just the ones that speak properly to them, not just anything, because remember, they target who they're going for as well. Don't think that it's just the color of the skin, because how you speak to them after as well, they target how they're going to approach it. They'll target how they're going to piss you off. Sorry to speak that way, but it's like, it's a two-way thing. We normally come in thinking that if we're loud about things, it's going to do that. But even when anything comes into place, just like congestion charge, just like anything you see, it doesn't come in loud like the way that I'd say we're trying to do it. As Archie has said, like, we should try, if we can, get another initiative in a sense of subliminal, and then it's more effective, I feel. But that's me, I'm out, sorry.
All right, we're going to need to make literally the last few comments. I don't know if you wanted to add or any comments that were made, Kojo, if you just want to kind of read them out or say them, but we literally have to close up soon.
Yeah, let me just go through some of the comments. And sorry if we couldn't get back to you on if you've made a comment and you haven't had the opportunity to share that with the rest of the team. I'll try to, I'm starting from, okay, let me start from Tay. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of an organization called Kwanda. It's an organization working to build reliable and empowering systems for Black communities. When I joined, there was about 100 to 200 of us, and now we're close to hitting 1,000 villages. The idea is to give a contribution of a certain amount, even as little as £1, your choice. You vote on what projects within the Black community as an organization we should support. If you want to start a project, you can also apply to get backing. We only need support projects. Okay, we only support projects by Black people for Black people. There are pots for Caribbean, African, and last month we gave a lot back to the community in Ghana. Excellent, excellent, Tay. It would be good to really share this. It's the first time I've heard of this, actually.
No, heard of them. They came to the Dope Black Dads.
Oh, were they? Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah, they were there. Yeah, we have heard of them.
I believe they also have a communication channel on Slack. Maybe you could share that with us, so we could share with the rest of the team. Are there people, sorry, this is from Ollie. Are there people who will support the application process for young Black entrepreneurs? So I'm guessing maybe this is more to do with funding that Ollie was kind of referring to. Pauline said, you cannot hold back time or season. Everything in its season. We have a lot of good and more to come. Don't be despondent. The youngsters are to be applauded. Then we have William here. William asks a question here, actually, which is quite interesting. Is there any WhatsApp groups that promote Black businesses, news of organizations, workshops, etc.? Because I wouldn't have met you or listened to Mo LDN if Marvin didn't invite me to this Zoom. So maybe this falls on us, maybe to kind of share on the platform a bit more with people. But on the part of Black businesses and news organizations, then maybe this might be a good point. If there is anything to share, maybe we could share in the chat. I'm not sure more if you have any of these organizations that you want to kind of answer this, or you want me to continue reading a few more.
So what we'll do in the chat, I'll get Cam or Ali, if you could just put the email address for LDN Perspective at Gmail. So you can email us and we can basically blast out some information. So we've got our YouTube channel as well. This is where we'll put the recording up. People can make comments, we'll put through. We've got our Instagram, which we're also going to utilize more to kind of share information and share businesses. So anyone can go on our Instagram and literally tag any businesses or whatever, and we're going to try and support that. And let's kind of grow this LDN community. It is a London perspective, and it is something we're working on in terms of how we can learn from each other, build each other, and build a community. It is come to that time, which has come to the end.
Oh, just one last thing though. We do have a WhatsApp group though, so you could maybe share that. If anyone wants to join that, maybe that's something you can mention as well.
Definitely. So we've got a community LDN Perspective WhatsApp group, and that's where we put all our information out on our episodes and what's coming up next. All right. So yes, thank you very much for coming. This is our first really big episode that we've done, especially with a large audience and everybody's input. I really do appreciate everybody's contribution and comments and support. Believe me, honestly, it is really, really, really enriching to me to see you all and your support and us coming together in this way. It's a great job what you're all doing and the contribution that everyone's doing individually. Let's put that all together. And very much back to what Stephen was saying, honestly, if we can start working on ourselves as well, I do believe we can grow more and achieve more. And I'm going to try and myself implement some kind of discipline tactics to help each other. A big thing I did want to do is some kind of code of conduct in terms of how we as a community carry ourselves and hold ourselves to. That is such a great thing. But yeah, again, thank you all. Appreciate the love. This is the LDN Perspective, and have a good night.
Perspectives, different views, one voice.